Good morning. Thanks for joining us, and welcome to our first TMT LinkedIn Live. Today, we will be exploring how businesses in our sector can be primed for growth when facing waves of disruption in the market. I'm Mary Shelton Rose. I'm a partner at PwC, and I lead our UK and EMEA TMT practice, working across clients in tech, media, and telco industries. I am delighted to be joined today by David Tulloch, Digital Strategy and Architecture Director at Microsoft, Ben Bird, PwC Partner, and Yulia Arvinescu, PwC Director. David has almost 4 years at Microsoft, but over 10 years of experience working in the TMT sector, including roles at Vodafone and Channel 4. Ben has spent the last 15 years supporting clients with new and emerging ways to engage and monetize customer engagement. His focus has not only been on strategy, but on changing the way clients need to operate in a multi-platform future. Yulia spent the last 14 years working in our TMT sector strategy practice. Her work is centered on growth and business model reinvention powered by technology in the B2B space. As the world changes faster and more unpredictably, many leaders are worried about their current path and that their current path will not be enough to sustain them in the long term. Our latest CEO survey found that 45% of CEOs globally don't believe that their businesses will be viable in the next 10 years. This worry is actually more pronounced in TMT, with telco at 52%, media at 57%, and tech at 48%. So notably, half or more of the respondents in our sector are skeptical about their company's current trajectory. So as we think about facing into this real world of disruption, we know we're in a challenging economic landscape. High interest rates, high inflation, tech disruption, talent shortages, all of this impacts our business. So I'm excited to be with you and to have a conversation about how we're primed for growth in this environment. So let's start with shifting customer expectations. It's across all of TMT. Ben, I want to come to you first. You spend a lot of time in the media business. There's a real shift in expectations from consumers on what they watch, how they watch it, the platforms they watch it on. Maybe you could spend a moment talking about how companies can look to grow in this environment.
Yeah, great. Thank you, Mary. Where we'd really start to think about where this journey started, I think about actually 15 years ago. Gathering audience data and thinking about audience data, was it really there to drive advertising yield, certainly around programmatic? What we've seen certainly with the rise of the SVODs is actually by taking that first-party data, by really understanding what is it that consumers are valuing, what are they engaging with, we can think about not only what content you start to serve, but actually that knowledge on first-party data can play the whole way through the process, from the commissioning and origination process all the way through to production and distribution. And then it also comes into where we think about reuse of content. A lot of the media clients that we work with have huge archives of content. Actually, how do you start to think about the first-party data and knowledge on that audience so you can start to serve up some of that content to that audience? The opportunities around that are pretty vast. The two things that you absolutely need there is strength in content and also the UX. What is the platform you're going to create? What's that value proposition you're going to put forward to consumers that mean that not only do they register with you, but they come back and engage with you time and time again. So we're seeing more and more, we're working with clients where they're thinking about their UX. That's even more prevalent now with the demise of cookies and actually the absolute need to have that first-party registration. Everybody thinks about value proposition in terms of subscription, but actually getting that value proposition to mean that actually consumers will even register with you and start to engage with you has been key. And really that's about how we use content and how we sweat the asset of content.
Content will always be incredibly important, right?
Absolutely.
And how customers are able to engage with it. It's a new revenue stream. So let's move on, because we'll come back to media in a bit. But David, let's talk about telco for a second. And I know you and I have had conversations about, is this a period of renaissance or are we potentially facing marginalization? So what does that really mean and why now? Why is now a tipping point?
Yeah, I think we are at this inflection point largely because of the advent of 5G and fiber technology, where telcos are either going to look to become a commodity business or there's an opportunity for renaissance. I think that, the number you open with at the top there, that's been driven largely in the consumer space in telco. We're seeing the average revenue per user has been flat for quite a while. I would say about 10 years now. If we look over that time, it's been declining probably about 30% over 10 years. So that's the beginning of a trajectory towards commoditization. So the business is got to think about what are new ways to drive revenue? How do we transform our business to actually move towards growth? And so there's a huge opportunity in terms of renaissance. If you think about the transition between the last generation of networks, so when we went from 3G to 4G, telcos invested millions in the infrastructure to make that possible. We unlocked all sorts of new capabilities. We could stream music on the go for the first time. We were able to interact and rich messaging. We were sharing photos and videos live. But all of the revenue for those services went to those OTT players and digital players. And the telcos took the debt, they invested in the infrastructure, but nobody paid any more for the phone bill for a 4G plan than they did for a 3G plan. And I think now the same is true as we move into the era of 5G. Actually, telcos are investing trillions in Europe. It's over 3 trillion they've invested in the 5G infrastructure. It's going to unlock a world of capability for business. So the question is, how do we move ourselves up the value chain beyond connectivity to actually unlock the additional value that we see? So I think the opportunity for telcos is in moving towards a platform business. So how can they become the orchestrator of all of these applications? It's going to involve partnering. We need to get from connectivity, we need to bring compute, and then understanding their enterprise customers, all of those 5G use cases around industrial automation, manufacturing, healthcare. How do telcos understand those businesses and get into the markets to do that? So I think there's a whole world of transformation, as you can imagine, involved in that, in terms of the skills that are required, in terms of the platforms they need, in terms of how they manage their data. But that is where there's a huge opportunity, and telcos that get that right, I think, are primed for benefiting from the growth that 5G is going to bring.
And really leaning into that growth as we talk about areas of growth and everything that you mentioned, but in that B2B conversation, right? Really leaning into that B2B conversation. So we'll come back to that in a moment. Yulia, I want to move to you. A lot of telcos want to become techcos, right? That's the trajectory and the path. And if we think about that from this transition from selling products to services, you spend a lot of your time working in that environment. What are you seeing?
It's also a good transition from you, David, because I work with a number of European-based multinational telcos, their B2B segment, which means serving their small, medium businesses, customers, or multinational or government agencies. And their customer needs are changing significantly. They are in a very competitive market, but with, I think, significant opportunities, because what their customers need now, they face the same challenges. They need to grow in their sectors with significant competition. They need to have a different business model in terms of how they design and deliver their products. They need to be able to simplify their business in order to have cost savings to reinvent themselves. So what they're looking for now is not a connectivity provider. They want a digital integrator where the connectivity is one play, but they want a one-stop shop, very robust in terms of competency, where they can just utilize. And my clients aim to do that. And they see the opportunities, connectivity as growth is in a decline, because of the price competitiveness, because of over-the-top coming in, the over-the-top players. But if you look at cybersecurity, data, cloud services, that's growth of 8 to 12% per annum globally. So there is a significant growth to go after. But are our techco clients ready to do it? Because also what the customers want is a cloud-native, hyperscaler-like experience, seamless omnichannel experience. And our telcos are not ready, because what it means for them is they need to be able to provide that seamless experience. They need to have ecosystem of partners much larger than before, where they need to provide to their partners the same seamless experience in order to be able to be that digital integrator. And that's where my clients are focusing on. It's moving from we provide products, telco-based, to we provide services where the telco products are one component of those services. And it's a fascinating transformation with a lot of benefits.
So I want to go a little deeper on that. So some recent research that we did came out with a statistic that said 75% of companies are going to invest more in cloud in the next 12 months. And that's not an easy thing to do, right? Because we know budgets are limited, right, in this economic environment. You started to go there already, Yulia. I want to go a little deeper on, this is not just about migration, right, and modernization. This is really about actually replatforming and thinking about how you provide these consumption-based services in a very different way than the products you sell today. Maybe say a little bit more on that, and David, feel free to jump in there.
I would love to, and you will need to stop me because I'm passionate, as you see, about it, and I could talk days about it. So where my telco clients are is they see the transformation enabled by IT having a different way of looking at IT, which is a platform-based play, open via APIs to their partners, to their customers, as a company transformation, not a replatforming of an IT. And this is a significant mind shift from the executive level all the way to the people who do that every day, because that means from a sales perspective, you will need to think about digital first. How do you move your business online? How do you work with your customers to move them to use your digital channels? That is, if we talk about the business, the sales. From an operations perspective, you need to have a very different skill set mix based on the current skill set, but you need to have the people being able to provide real-time insights to the customers for them to be able to know the quality of the network, of the services, where they are in the digital transformation, or you are their digital integrator. And then you need to be able to be supported with an IT infrastructure that enables all that, but also an IT team that is able to work agile, to change direction when it needs to, because things don't go right all the time, but being able to prioritize what matters. So that's what I see. And cloud is the foundation, because the customers of my telco clients and of my tech clients, they are on the cloud migration path. They want their suppliers to become partners to help them on that path. They don't want to get the complexities of their partners into their ecosystem and into their migration to cloud. I will stop. As I said, I'll give the mic back because I will talk days.
It's a great topic to be passionate about. I think we all are. Did you want to add something?
Yeah,
Ben?
absolutely. I think, when I think about my client base, so global media clients, they are pretty much being defined by their tech stack, and they're seeing the sheer limitations. I'm sure we'll come on to talk about AI, but the adoption of cloud, the amount of technical debt, and certainly, broadcasters being disrupted, publishers have been disrupted for a number of years. Actually, there has been a lack of investment in tech stack, and there has been a sort of slightly make, do, and mend mindset. We're also coming from a backdrop where people have had grown up in an era where own platforms and own systems have been developed. I think probably that's pretty finished, because of the pace and scale of change, but also the scale of investment and Yulia, to pick up on your point, the real need for connectivity and building a platform. The sheer cost of doing that is pretty prohibitive, and so what we're seeing is this is much more about leveraging partnerships with some of the hyperscalers, and really looking at how you leverage those relationships to build a new way to engage with consumers and clients. But actually, it's really massively driven off the pace that you can go about that as well.
Yeah, I think you've covered exactly what I was going to say. But in addition, I think data is a key strategic asset in terms of how, particularly for telcos, they run their business, and that is a complete step change in how they operate. And as you were saying, it's all about operating model. It's a new skill set, software-defined skills. How do we manage data? How do we leverage the scale of AI? But also, how do we move at pace and deliver change, faster than ever before? We're seeing, in terms of technology development, we're seeing the rate of development moving at a quicker pace than we've ever seen before. But also, we're seeing adoption of from the user base faster than ever before. So if you think about the likes of Netflix, it took about 3.5 years for them to reach their first 1 million users. ChatGPT did that in 5 days. Yeah. So new technologies are getting into the hands of customers faster than ever before. And actually, they're expecting that from their service providers. They expect us to understand and be able to interact and scale up. And I think, as a result of that, product life cycles are getting shorter than they ever have before. We're trying to move to new revenue growth. So we need to be able to be, as you're saying, we need to be able to be agile, and we need to scale.
So if we need cloud as the foundational layer, we need data, absolutely. And you've talked about the deprecation of cookies, coming to first-party data, even more important. And I've heard the term GenAI, so I'm surprised it took us this long to get into the conversation. But let's talk about GenAI, right? Because I think it's incredibly important to our industry and becoming even more so. We're seeing most of the opportunity right now with our clients and what I would call the productivity and efficiency gains. But you just started to mention things around like product life cycle, and we know there is opportunity with hyper-personalization and many other ways to grow revenue streams. But I want to come back to you, David. Let's start with you. Where do you see the most opportunity right now, and how are people harnessing the power of what GenAI can do?
It's such a broad question. It's everywhere in the business, right? We're seeing there was a survey published last year. I think they're expecting sort of $60 to $100 billion per year in additional value added to the telco industry just as a result of using GenAI. So that is a mixture of optimization as well as new revenue streams. Probably the most common conversation we have with customers is in the customer experience space. So for telcos, how do they transform? How do we get to know our customers really well and build? And that's true actually in media too. How do we build these sort of hyper-personalized experiences? I think the real value GenAI brings is in two ways. One is it's a new way for us to interact with computers, which is natural language. So for the first time, since almost the mouse and keyboard, we've got a new way to interact with the power of compute. And the second thing is it's can reason over different types of data than ever before. So we have these large language models. We can take lots of different data sets. So if we think about the value that unlocks, so thinking about reasoning over lots of different types of data, we have a telco customer in the UK here who prides themselves on being sort of best in class for data, and most of their customers are streamers or gamers, and so it's really important to them that they provide a stable quality experience. And so we've been using GenAI to look across, the massive amounts and different types of data. So how do we pull data out of the radio access network, transport network, core network, as well as then bringing in the IT stack, so we can understand per service they offer or per customer what's the kind of experience they're getting and what's the score. And then the generative side, we can create short kind of one-sentence summaries about what's going on in a customer's experience. And that unlocks value on both sides. So one, you can look at how you're utilizing the network, and is it being, is the capacity being utilized? How can you prioritize customer needs? But also you can get to know your customers far better. How are they using the network? What's the kind of experience they're getting? What are revenue opportunities for driving growth? So you can use both of those. And then as we think about opening up network APIs to third-party functions and things for revenue, you can do that based on a deep understanding of the customer. And then the second half, in terms of a new way to interact with computers, I think the democratization of these capabilities has been massive. So we've seen, there's a customer I'm working with in the US, where they've empowered a lot of their frontline staff with generative AI. And I think that's really the value. You could be sitting thinking, or talking to your teams and saying, wouldn't it be wonderful if we had an app that could do whatever. And normally that's a 4-year transformation program. And by the time it's delivered, the team that asked for it have moved on, or there's been a step change. But actually, there was this guy working in frontline fixed ordering and was able to ask in natural language his LLM to create an application that sorted a load of the process and reasoned over lots of different types of data. And it can within minutes, and his manager was impressed. They rolled it out across their team, and this year they've saved 97,000 hours just from something that someone came up with on their own in the front line as a business. So I think the opportunity there on both sides is massive.
It's incredible for talent too, because I bet the 97,000 hours were not hours spent doing things that somebody really enjoyed, right? It really gives us something different to start with, a different way to upskill our people, something to really think about differently with our talent base.
And it's a different way to reason. We have this phrase of an intelligent worker. So it's humans co-reasoning with machines. It's not that you're going to have a system that just automates something without a brain or without creativity involved. Actually, it's about how do we leverage it as a tool to co-reason and find solutions, so we're not spending time on manual rekeying or whatever the drudgery is. It's actually thinking about how do we...
It's always having that human in the middle, so that we know what we're intending to do is what we're actually doing. Ben, what are you seeing with GenAI in the media business?
Yeah, completely. AI has got a phenomenal role to play and is in playing. Just to touch on the sort of where we see AI, and there is at times there's a sort of fear of AI and what does it mean for a resource, even more so in a creative environment like media. And we saw that within the writers' strike and so on and so forth. We can talk about that at length. But actually, if we start to think around where do you really deploy the human? Where does that creative sit? And then what's the use of AI that sits around that? So one of the areas that we're working with a number of clients on is actually long-form journalism. Actually, people sitting down, writing the narrative, writing a story. That content will get used over multiple platforms, and that historically has meant people subbing it up, subbing it down, serving it across different platforms. The ability for AI to take content and repurpose it and look at the copywriting of that content, maybe it's around tone of voice, because actually that's what the consumer expects, or the length of content, because again, that's what the consumer expects. AI can play a massive role in that. And so that's about putting the individual, where you have a creative that sat there and creating content, actually in creating the base content. And then how do we use AI to make sure that we really sweat that asset of content as much as possible? And why is that important? Because fundamentally, if we can monetize content as much as we possibly can, it means that it creates the economics for us to invest in creating more content. So I think there's a lot to be said here about how AI can enable further investment in creatives building fantastic content, and that's really important to think about. From a production standpoint, we also start to see AI in how we're starting to build very personalized experiences for consumers. So actually, if you understand you really like particular content types, whether that's sports, whether or not that's weather content, whether or not it's features content, being able to build that experience around the individual is key, and AI is playing a massive role there as well.
And just adding to it, if we think about the tech sector, software development, both in terms of internal efficiencies, but also system integrators, while we need to recognize GenAI is on a journey and we don't have all the answers and is not embedded in all the products, my clients are already factoring that in their pricing, because there is an expectation from their customers that the way they deliver the product, the way they deliver the services will be different, will be more efficient, will be a different experience. So it is a journey, though. We need to recognize that we haven't worked out all the ins and outs of what's the role of the human versus the role of the machine, in order to make sure that the results that need to be real-time are real-time and the quality that is required.
I think it's really exciting what all of you said about it, but I love the idea that we have the ability to create new products and services and test them in ways that we never have before. And that is really a growth driver, and just the amazing amount of increase in productivity that this technology can give us allows that room for people to be more creative and actually to invest in developing different things. So I think we're all excited about it, right? Early days. And just really importantly, I think with GenAI, it's the why are you using it, right? For what purpose, and what business problem are you trying to solve, and what function are you working in, and what is the value in it? And that's how we're working together and working with clients on how they decide where to invest and how to invest. So I want to turn to the investment conversation for a moment. We know we started this with a bit of worry about sustainability of business models. We know funding can be challenging. So Ben, you spend time in this area as well. If you think about how businesses are funding investing in the things that we're all excited about. What are you seeing?
Yeah, and look, I think the very initial stat there, around 57% of CEOs, really see their business model struggling over the next 10 years, I think is absolutely key to actually the size of shift and scale of transformation that needs to go on across the media sector. This is not, what we're talking about today isn't a sort of bolt-on of product. It's not a bolt-on within your technology function. This is a fundamental pivot and shift for the whole organization. And so really understanding what this scale of disruption and change means right across the organization, that can be from your content creation process. What does that mean? How do we embrace much better understanding of our consumers in the way that we build content, all the way through to your monetization methods, whether or not that's e-commerce, whether or not that's subscriptions, whether or not that's other marketing activities, all the way through to product, IT, even finance, HR. It is going to change every single component of the business. And we're seeing clients really start off with, how can we get better use out of our first-party data? And the conversation realizing with the, typically the executive understanding, crikey, this is going to change every single component of our business. So the number one is scale of transformation. The second is investment. Typically, we're working with large media clients which have a traditional revenue stream, whether or not that's linear broadcast, whether or not that's publishing, that is actually funding the whole economics of the organization, whilst also understanding there is a significant requirement to invest in new products and platforms moving forward. This sort of creates two challenges, and culturally can create a challenge within a lot of our media clients, that you have an area of huge investment whilst you have another area where cost is really being tackled. The idea here is not to think about two halves of the organization, but really how do you leverage off the very strong brands that a lot of our clients have in those traditional business models, and start to pivot that over to what the sort of future shape of those media organizations looks like. That is really around understanding where is their cost within the organization, which you're likely to probably try and remove over the next 5 years, and how do you go after that at pace to reinvest? It's that reinvestment, identifying internal investment opportunities and internal cost out, and being able to reinvest that into the growth areas within the business. Pace around that is key, because the quicker you move, the greater the benefit you'll drive, and therefore the ability to reinvest that. We're also seeing the use of hyperscalers and how you think about this in partnership. The scale of the transformation, as I talked around, and the pace, actually it's very difficult for any one media client to do that in isolation. So how do you start to think about the partnerships that you need to create, and the role that partners can play?
That might be a good opportunity to ask a hyperscaler partner. What are those opportunities? How do you think about that investment?
Yeah, I think you're absolutely right in terms of there's two halves to it, and I think so. You mentioned media, but on the telco side, the same is true in terms of there's been a digital transformation or digital telco initiative, telco to techco, for a few years, and often that's been a cost optimization conversation. So how do we take costs out of the business? But actually, if you think about that economic value added curve, the question is, what are the big investments that we're going to make to really change the game? And as we've already said, that platform vision that we've outlined in terms of working with partners, so we need to bring connectivity together with compute, together with industry-specific applications and partners. That's a whole end-to-end ecosystem. That means we need to be thinking radically about how we invest in our skill set. Our data, it needs to be on a scalable infrastructure. It needs to be in the cloud, really, to have the speed of deployment and the agility. I think we're partnering a lot with telcos. We're doing it quite broadly. So in terms of, earlier this year, we announced a partnership with a telco here in the UK that looks right across the business. So not just around optimizing networks, but we're thinking about how do we modernize their data estate, bring it to the cloud. We're thinking about how do we help them in SMB, go to market, reselling applications that small businesses need, which gives them a scale play. And then for large enterprise, we're supporting them in terms of how do we go to market together, both attracting the skills, but also bring software development talent together with connectivity know-how to bring those products to market. So actually, together, we're jointly going to market, which is giving them a competitive advantage and sort of helping to leapfrog, I think, in terms of the amount of transformation that you need to go through, because it's bringing the skills and capability there. I mean, that's how, as a hyperscaler, we define ourselves as a platform business. So we understand the value of that, I think, and we partner heavily. So if you think about what we've been working on with GenAI, actually a lot of the value is about how do we get that into the hands of consumers that use those applications every day. So for telcos, we're partnering with the likes of Amdocs to bring, generative AI capability to the CRMs that customers are using every day. In the media space, we're embedding that into the likes of, with Avid or with MediaKind or Harmonic or with Evertz. We've got GenAI in their Bravo Studio product now. So you can ask, if you're a director on the floor, you can ask, show me a shot of number 7 left taking a strike or whatever it is, and it will play that back in real time. So that, it's actually how do we bring the technology and get it into the hands of consumers, and that means partnering end to end.
I think it's a really exciting time because it's no longer about implementing technology. It's about co-solutioning.
Yeah, absolutely.
It's about this whole conversation actually is really about business model reinvention. It's how will we make money differently in the future? What will our businesses look like? What operating model do we need? What technology do we need? What talent do we need? So it really is around reinventing our business model and the co-solutioning. It's exciting. It's fun to be part of that together. I think we should probably wrap soon, but I'd love to do a lightning round just quickly. Yulia, I'll come to you first. What's your kind of one piece of advice for all of our TMT businesses listening on how to really be primed for growth?
I would say it's probably in 3 parts. One is be ambitious. There is a great opportunity to go after. Second is be informed what that opportunity means in terms of the business change, the business model that the reinvention you need to go through, and also the investment. Don't underestimate. And third is be pragmatic in terms of how you can fund. We've just talked about options to use the partner ecosystem, options potentially to carve out a part of the business and get third-party capital in order to achieve your ambition, and also be agile to change. There will be changes, but keep an eye on the final outcome. Are you still achieving your ambition that you have set for? This will be my advice. Be ambitious, but be informed and pragmatic.
And pragmatic. Love it. David.
Yeah, I think 3 words I would say similarly: be bold, be quick, and be scalable. Those don't rhyme at all, do they? I should have thought of that before we started. But I think, similarly to what you were saying, we need to be bold. We need to be making investments that are really going to move the needle in terms of revenue growth. So we need to be brave. We need to be able to move quickly. So we need to be able to scale at pace, try things, move from one business model to the next. And also when we get something that works, particularly telco media, it's a scale play. So how do we get it in the hands of our consumers at scale as quickly as we can?
We have to be able to test and learn and scale quickly. Absolutely agree. Ben.
Yeah, great. I think with the scale of disruption that we've got coming through, I would really say that we're in a time of significant risk, but actually we're at a time of significant opportunity on the inverse of that as well. So actually really understanding, what are the risks we're facing, and actually where do we see the opportunities through those risks. And I sort of sit with many execs where you start with a conversation very much around, crikey, how do we manage this risk? How do we manage this risk on cookies, on some of the economic challenges that we're facing and what we're seeing from some of the advertising community? And we really identify the opportunities within there. Mm-hmm. The second point I would really make is around pace. I haven't ever sat with a client at the end of a transformation program and they've regretted the pace in which they've operated. Pace is absolutely key. We're only going to see an increase in the pace of transformation and change and disruption, unfortunately, I think, across the sector, but actually the pace of opportunities that come towards us. And then the third is really thinking around every single operation in the organization. They will need to pivot, they will change as we go through each client goes through their own transformation activities, but actually thinking that through and getting ahead of the pace point. And driving those cost changes.
I think the one thing I would just add to what each of you said is the focus on talent. And really, we need the right talent. We need to invest in upskilling. We need to support the change that we're going to go through as organizations and industry with our talent. So thank you. This really is the moment to think about how our businesses, what their businesses will be in the future, how we'll generate revenue, what our business model will be, our operating model, importantly, how we build trust and resiliency in the change that we're going to face. So as we look ahead, how do we embrace everything we've heard today? How are we going to use it in our organizations to prime for growth? I'd like to thank you for joining our discussion today, and thank you to our speakers for your wonderful thoughts and insights and your sharing your experience. Thank you.
Thank you, Mary.